This is Jim Fetzer in Madison, Wisconsin, with Giuseppe Vaffangulo from the District of Criminals and Dave Scorpio from the exotic land of Ecuador. We have the latest news you need to know. We begin with the swearing in and confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett as Donald Trump's third pick of a conservative justice to the Supreme Court, solidifying a 6-3 conservative majority. This was a very nice event at the White House where Clarence Thomas swore her in. She gave a very short, sweet speech about how politicians have the obligation to promote their preferences, judges have the obligation to suppress them and rule strictly in accordance with the law. I was impressed. She was confirmed by a slim 52-48 vote, straight Republican except for Susan Collins, who joined the chamber's 47 Democrats in voting against. That appears to have been an agreement because of her political situation in Maine. Susan Collins earned my eternal admiration for the thoughtful way in which she handled the Kavanaugh nomination, where her views were decisive, and she provided one of the best reasoned, articulate, eloquent, even speeches ever given on the floor of the Senate. Meanwhile, Senator Mazie Hirono, whom Tucker has dubbed the dumbest woman in the Senate, maybe in the entire Congress, votes hell no. She is a very strange person. Meanwhile, Biden's court punt is getting a lukewarm response where he's waffling about whether or not he's going to pack the court. He's saying what he's going to do is create a commission for 180 days. That's, of course, a typical action in Washington, D.C. If you got a serious problem, you create a commission. Here's Senator Ed Markey of Mass. I'm glad the vice president has decided to have a commission, but others are really perplexed, and it doesn't seem to satisfy anyone. Meanwhile, the Progressive Change Campaign Committee shows how Democrats are responding. They actually did it. Now make sure it never happens again. It's done. Senate Republicans just confirmed Amy Coney Barrett as the 9th justice on the Supreme Court. She will serve for decades as a living embodiment of the worst of the Trump administration. This was not the work of democracy. Republicans stole this seat, rushed the process, risked lives in a deadly pandemic, and forced through an extreme nominee. Talk about political bullshit. Giuseppe, your thoughts?
Yeah, Jim, insanely polarized. It's like we're living in two different worlds. The color revolution clown world, the Bolshevik drive to destroy the sovereign public of the United States, with George Soros now controls the Democratic Party and all its violent, progressive Antifa, BLM operatives. And then you've got the Trump faction, who once returned to a more traditional America. I guess you could call them traditionalists. And so it's what they call it, the culture wars are really becoming the brink of civil war. And it's, I don't think it's going to go very well after next Tuesday for sure. There's going to probably be intense violence in the big cities. And it's just a tragedy that the color revolution acolytes are so weak-minded, and they believe the lies of communism. They need to take a look at actual history and what's happened when any country becomes communist. Millions of people are murdered brutally. And talking about looking at history, these weak-minded, the sky is falling because I can't get an abortion types should look at the history of what Zionism has done to the United States, and starting with the twisting Woodrow Wilson's arm behind his back to put the Zionist traitor Louis Brandeis into the Supreme Court, and the same has occurred following that tradition with Ginsburg, who was a Zionist traitor, and the whole goal is to drive the United States away from being a sovereign republic, champion a stable family, to create this internationalist Jew control with the Noahide laws, and the idea that anything that the Talmud says, such as pedophilia, is legal. That was Ruth Bader Ginsburg's true agenda, to push forward pedophilia, and I thank God she's gone.
That's a fascinating observation. I'll tell you, Giuseppe, I think the vote is going to be so overwhelming that there's going to be no justification for violence in the street. That it may still happen, of course, but we're going to be seeing something terribly interesting. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, I thought Giuseppe made a great analysis, and I do think there's going to be serious trouble ahead. And it doesn't matter if there's any reason for it. All you got to say is, oh, Trump is a Putin puppet, or the Russians stole the election, or whatever they want to say. And it's interesting. Giuseppe hit upon communism. I talked with a guy from Venezuela yesterday, and we had a long discussion about communism. And he said, "Man, these communists, they ruin every country they come into." Venezuela used to be a very wealthy country,
right?
And so, yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And the best thing about having Amy Coney Barrett finally confirmed is we're not going to have to hear any more wonderful stories about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's going to go down the memory hole. We don't have to hear about her Talmudic agenda anymore, and what a wonderful person she was, all that stuff. So thank God that's over. And as far as the court packing, there's a couple of times where old Groper Joe kind of admitted it with a nudge, nudge, kind of wink, wink thing, that, yeah, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, we'll have to wait and see. So really, if these crazy Biden and Harris get into office, I'm telling you, anything could happen. They're going to completely dismantle society as we know it, and it'll be like Giuseppe said on the last show, America will become a third world shithole.
Well, mind you, I was suggesting probably a pacification of violent reaction if the vote is overwhelmingly for Trump, as I believe it will be. But if Biden and Harris were to win, my God, all bets are off. Would be incredible. And I most certainly don't predict it. Meanwhile, confirmed, Trump has footage of Hunter Biden raping and torturing little girls, which he is set to release. Biden himself, actually, that might be Joe because he appears to have earlobes, but the angle's odd. Snaps at a reporter amid the email controversy, not happy. Taking questions outside his private jet when approached by a CBS News reporter, Mr. Biden, what's your response to the New York Post story about your son, sir? I know you'd asked it. I have no response. It's another smear campaign right up your alley. Those are the questions you always ask. How absurd is that? Obviously, this is appropriate. The New York Post obtained a 2015 email indicating Vladimir Pozharsky, an advisor to the Ukrainian energy company Burisma, thanked Hunter Biden for giving an opportunity to meet his father, who was then serving as vice president. The elder Biden, the candidate, has previously said he's never spoken to his son about his overseas business dealings. But of course, we know more. We even have photographs of them together. Meanwhile, Representative Jim Jordan, a very good man, has discussed reviewing and authenticating the emails from the laptop, which Leslie Stahl said could not be verified. We have the eyewitness, Tony Bobulinski, who said these are authentic, these are real, listed as a recipient of an email published by the Post detailing a business arrangement with a Chinese company and members of the Biden family. Confirmed last week, the email is genuine, noting Hunter has some office expectations. He'll elaborate a proposed equity split 20 for H and 10 held by H for the big guy. The reference to the big guy is, in fact, to Joe Biden, Bobulinski has affirmed. We have so much here, it's fascinating. Why won't Joe Biden say they're not real? Jordan asked. If they're not accurate, if these aren't accurate emails, why won't the Bidens say so? The Democratic nominee has repeatedly denied he's been involved in discussions about his son's business dealings, but that appears to be a complete and total sham. I think this is just a killer. Giuseppe, your thoughts?
You're 100% accurate, Jim. The Joe Biden is doing the tried and true methodology of acting like nothing is going on because his foot is in the mousetrap. He's caught. And so if he admits it, he destroys any chance of winning the election. However, if he acts surly and says, you always do this, he deflects the truth and he feeds the Trump derangement syndrome people whose handlers can still somehow pull off stealing the election. Let's hope not.
Scorpio, your thoughts?
That's good, Giuseppe. A foot is in the mousetrap and his hand is in the cookie jar too.
Yeah.
I think Joe Biden is used to getting questions like, oh, what flavor of ice cream did you get, sir? That's the kind of questions he's used to. And I think he's been promised that the media would be kept under control. That's why he gets so upset, because it's a done deal. The media is under their control, and any reporter that steps out of line is going to be punished, I think, at this point. And we're seeing that the big guy, that's Joe the Godfather Biden, El Capo, even issuing physical threats to people, man. It's going to be hard to keep this all covered up in the information age, but they're doing their best.
Yeah, they're doing their best, but it's like the little Dutch boy. They can't get their fingers in all the holes in the dike. Meanwhile, this is pretty interesting. New York Post endorses Trump for president in an editorial Monday saying it would result in explosive job creation, rising wages, and general prosperity, and would really tick off Hollywood. We can return to the explosive job creation, rising wages, and general prosperity we had before the pandemic. We can have economic freedom and opportunity and resist cancel culture and censorship. We can put Annus Horribilis 2020 behind us and make America great again. We can do all this if we make the right choice on November 3rd. Biden would open the border floodgates again, and by all appearances would go back to normalization with China, a byword for though they're eating our lunch. The Post earlier had published a series of controversial report about his son Hunter, initially writing it and obtained the emails showing him arranging the meeting we've just described. The report's sourcing and accuracy have been challenged, but have also now, of course, been confirmed. Challenged by the left-leaning media who don't want to admit a word of it. Trump will not be looking to remake the country. He will trust that America will, given support, but not interference, bounce back. He will, in short, not get in the way. Re-electing him is the best choice for the United States. I like that part about ticking off Hollywood. Here's the cover. Make America Great Again, Again. The Post had withheld endorsing Trump or Hillary in 2016, suggesting really vote for the one you dislike the least. The Hill found shortly before the 2016 election, by the way, that 57 of 59 major U.S. newspapers had endorsed Hillary. The only exceptions being the Las Vegas Review-Journal and the Florida Times-Union in Jacksonville, Florida. Compliments to them for their good sense. Giuseppe, your thoughts?
I think that the Hill has it right. And I think they said, one quote, we can put Annus Horribilis 2020 behind us and make America great again. If Biden and Harris get in there and deliver the New World Order agenda, you can take out one end and it'll be Annus Horribilis.
Yeah, something like that. Yes. Scorpio.
Well, I like that line about would really tick off Hollywood. That's funny. It's a bonus. I like that. And, It's funny how, the Democrats and Joe Biden would open up the floodgates of illegal immigration. Well, I thought they were all worried about COVID. It shows what a hoax this whole thing is. If they were really worried about it and it's this deadly pandemic, they'd close the borders off completely and there wouldn't even be a discussion about it. And the other thing that's interesting is that, the mainstream media has had control over the narrative for so long. They can't fathom, they can't see the fact that they're losing control of the narrative because they've had it for so long and slowly slipping out of their hands. They're actually rapidly slipping out of their hands, but they just can't see it.
Yes, yes. The internet has made such a difference, and people are seeing through. Trump did this great thing for the country by talking about and exposing the fake news media. Meanwhile, Mayor de Blasio, a gift that just keeps on giving, pledges to take swift action against an NYPD cop caught praising Donald Trump. How outrageous is this? New York City Mayor de Blasio spoke out Sunday to say swift action will be taken against a police officer caught on camera saying Trump 2020 the night before. Multiple videos have been making the rounds on social media showing him saying over the loudspeaker of his patrol car while two other officers talk to each other nearby. Do it again. What? You can't say Trump 2020? Now you having what? The man behind the camera can be heard saying, say it again. When the officer repeats the words, the man with the camera loses it, shouting, go after yourself, you effing fascist. The next video shot by someone else at a different angle shows what happened next. Trump 2020, put it on YouTube, put it on Facebook. Trump 2020, the cop said over the loudspeaker. Take a picture, take a video, put it on your Facebook, put it on YouTube, have some fun. De Blasio has fired back. Let me be clear. Any NYPD officer pushing any political agenda while on duty will face consequences. We will act fast here, and this will not be tolerated. New York PD Commissioner Dermot Shea addressed the tweet as well. 100% unacceptable, period. Law enforcement must remain apolitical, essential in our role to serve all New Yorkers, regardless of any political beliefs. Meanwhile, Michigan election workers are told to dispose of ballots, expel poll watchers. They're being given instruction. Election workers in Michigan have been told during their official training classes they should dispose of ballots, expel poll watchers, and count challenge ballots. The Gateway Pundit reports the election workers were provided with ways in which they can prevent poll watchers from doing their job. They have to wear a mask. They have to stay 6 feet. That's important because if you don't have 6 feet, they can't come back there, the instructor told attendees, joking about how social distancing guidelines could be used to obfuscate the process, as a person observing these rules cannot see or verify signatures. Unless they got really good vision or they brought their binoculars, the instructor quipped. He then told election workers to forcibly expel poll watchers from the polling locations if they were insisting on scrutiny of absentee ballots. If they make a scene, get them up out of there, she added, call the police on them. The instructor told election workers to deliberately deceive people by giving those who had absentee ballots stolen a provisional ballot. After the individual requesting the provisional ballot votes under the belief that his or her vote had been counted, it will be destroyed. The next part is even more disturbing, as anyone who's had their absentee ballot stolen or had one issued to a fraudulent person will not be able to vote. This also means people cannot double vote, but if they intended to do that, they could just as easily use someone else's name. An end trainer says if the person swears they did not vote absentee, to issue that person a provisional ballot, which goes into a special envelope that eventually just gets thrown out. So the person thinks they're casting their vote when it really just goes into the garbage. Even scarier is that these are teenagers working behind the scene. Any of them can run any ballot they want through the tabulator or toss them into the provisional sack to be tossed away, and the voter will be none the wiser. This coming, of course, from a vital swing state, casting major doubt on the integrity of the election in Michigan, a crucial battleground Trump won in 2016 after decades of Democrat dominance. Giuseppe, disturbing stuff.
Jim, yesterday, Scorpio quoted his grandfather espousing the timeless chestnut, "The apple does not fall far from the tree." And it's interesting with de Blasio, who friends of mine, longtime New Yorkers, have said he's destroyed the city, literally like a cancer is eating away at it with his policies. And did you know that de Blasio, who's changed his name like 2 times and is a closeted pillow biter who married a radical lesbian, and their one child is a drug abusing, violent Antifa provocateur? But did you know that de Blasio's grandfather and his great uncle were the key CIA operatives who led the first coup in Iran to topple the duly elected government in 1953? That was de Blasio's grandfather and great uncle who did that. So clearly de Blasio is deep state through and through. And it's just a shame what, the city had really bounced back since the 70s, and now they're taking it down and turning it into a rotting apple, the big apple. And in Michigan, again, a globalist loyalist, the great she-ape Whitmer, is just destroying that state. And it's interesting. We should have on the show one of these days the newcomer that you found to you interviewed him a few weeks ago, and then you helped him get a show on Revolution Radio, Chris Weiner. He lives in Michigan. He absolutely despises the great she-ape, and that would be a great discussion with him to talk about what it's like to live under Whitmer in Detroit.
Well, that first coup by the CIA in Iran in 53 was led by Kermit Roosevelt. Is de Blasio related to him or another of the participants and organizers?
No, de Blasio, he was like the head man, but the guys who were actually making it happen on the ground were Blasio, grandfather and great uncle. They were the...
What a disgusting legacy.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Great information there on de Blasio, Giuseppe. And let's remember, too, what was the great sin of Mossadegh? He wanted to nationalize Iran's oil. Right. That was his great sin. And it's something that would have greatly helped the people of Iran to pay the bills and create infrastructure, etc. So that's why he had to be gotten rid of. And the thing about the cop in New York City, if you watch videos in New York City, the police have been instructed that they're really not allowed to talk about anything other than, "Hello, how are you, sir?" And I think, it's sad that they expect cops to be these mindless automatons that just do as they're told. I was glad to hear, a story about someone, speaking their mind. Good for him. And
I couldn't agree more. I think Mossadegh had actually gone ahead and nationalized, and that's why they had to execute the coup to regain, control of the oil under the Shah, who implemented decades of terror with his secret police, perhaps the most vicious the world has ever known.
Yeah. And just lastly, on the last show, Giuseppe made a very astute point that the Democrats are the real fascists here. And because, look, they support censorship, they support government control over every aspect of our lives. Even, if we can see our family at Thanksgiving, these people have completely lost it. And what they're doing is they're using their support for gay rights and anal sex as their cover to say, "I can't be a fascist. I support gay rights." That's their cover.
Well, that's an interesting question.
That's a great point.
Because historically, as Mussolini observed, fascism can be equally well defined as corporatism or as a merger of big business with big government, leaving, of course, the customer, the consumer, defenseless. But they're using the tactics of brown shirts, brutality, suppressing freedom of speech. And this all does have aspects of the Bolshevism, of cultural Marxism, writ large here. It's all very disgusting. But I agree with you insofar as what we think of as fascist tactics are certainly those being employed by the Democrats, Antifa, and Black Lives Matter, not by the Republicans. It's ironic but it also goes hand in hand with propaganda. You never admit what you're really doing. Meanwhile, Tucker Carlson's ratings have jumped to the next level with epic Hunter Biden info drops. He's actually up to 5.8 million. This is greater than has ever been seen on television before, outside of, some national event. The only two things on TV last Wednesday night with more viewers were the American League and National League Baseball Championship games, and that's only because they were 4 hours long and on two different channels. For the 1 hour he was on the air, he more than doubled the audiences of those two championship Major League Baseball games. This has never happened in cable ratings history before. Unless there's a presidential election or a national emergency, the news never draws more viewers than a show like Real Housewives ever. So congrats to Tucker again. His impact on national dialogue is so significant that Twitter had to shut itself down entirely on Thursday. Carlson tweeted that he had new exclusive Hunter laptop info he's going to break on the air that night. Because it couldn't keep up with all the retweets to stamp him out, Twitter threw in the towel and shut itself down for 2 hours during the run-up to Tucker's show. Technical difficulties. So what's new? Rudy wasn't kidding when he referred to the Bidens as a Biden crime family, where the family financials are structured like the mafia. In organized crime, you have street-level dope pushers, pimps, bookies, and others who are required to kick money upstairs every week to the mafia's lieutenants, price of doing business. The lieutenants are required to kick money upstairs to the capos, and the capos kick money upstairs to the big boss at the head of the family. Everybody kicks money upstairs. In one of Hunter's emails, we've learned all of Hunter's business deals with the Chinese, the Kazakhs, the Ukrainian are required to set aside 10% for the big guy. Hunter also scolded his niece in a text message recovered. I love you all, but I don't receive any respect. That's fine, I guess. Works for you, apparently. I hope you all can do what I did and pay for everything for this entire family for 30 years. Right. Hunter is a busy little bee working his tail off for the family. And another message he observed, one of the most damning, Hunter tells it it's really hard, but don't worry. Unlike Pop, I won't make you give me half your salary. According to Rudy, we've only scratched the surface with the information out so far. I'm making popcorn. Almost time for Tucker's show, and like most Americans, I won't miss a minute of it. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris laughs nervously at the suggestion that Biden's a Trojan horse for socialistic policy, which we all know is exactly the case. You're very different in the policies you've supported in the past, Nora O'Donnell said to Harris about her policy differences with Joe Biden. You're considered the most liberal United States senator. To which Harris replied, somebody said that, and it actually was Mike Pence on the debate stage. She laughed uncomfortably. Yeah, well, actually, the nonpartisan GovTrack has rated you as the most liberal senator, O'Donnell interjected. You supported the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, legalizing marijuana. Joe Biden doesn't support those things. So are you going to bring the policies, those progressive policies you supported as a senator, into a Biden administration? Harris countered by saying she promised Biden she will always share with him her lived experience and perspective on any issue they may confront. Is that a socialist or progressive perspective, O'Donnell asked. No, Harris answered, laughing even more uncomfortably than before. It's a perspective of a woman who grew up a black child in America, who is also a prosecutor, who as a mother arrived here at the age of 19 from India, who also, likes hip hop. Like, what do you want to know? With no doubt, if elected, would Kamala advocate for Medicare for all, a plan Joe doesn't support? It's going to happen. At this point, O'Donnell plainly stated what it was she'd been trying to get at. Well, I want to give you the opportunity to address this because at the Republican National Convention, President Trump made the case that Joe Biden is going to be nothing more than a Trojan horse for socialist policies for the left wing of the Democratic Party. Are you going to push those policies when you're vice president? She then countered with a vague answer. I'm not going to be confined to Donald Trump's definition of who I or anyone else is. And I think America has learned that would be a big mistake. Eventually, she came around to articulating that she would not have joined the ticket if she didn't support Biden's proposals, but it was arduous to get there. The Liberal senator's difficulty in fielding basic questions did nothing to assuage moderates who may be concerned about the party's progressive movement. Meanwhile, mask wearing will remain mandatory even after a COVID vaccine under a Democrat administration. A top doctor who served as an expert for the Congress says even after a vaccine is available, mask wearing and social distancing will remain mandatory. I feel there's a perception once we have a COVID vaccine, life will go back to normal. Tweeted Dr. Krutika Kupali, life will not be like it was pre-COVID. Even after we have a vaccine, you'll still need to use good hygiene, maintain physical distance, avoid crowds, and wear masks. As we've repeatedly highlighted, despite the original lockdown and social distancing, we're being told life will never get back to normal. We have an international security editor for CNN writing, mandatory wearing a mask will become permanent, just a part of life. A senior Army official said there'll probably never be a return to normal, and that rules like social distancing and mask wearing will become permanent. Philanthropist Bill Gates, monster that he is, warned the world won't return to normal until there's widespread take-up of a second coronavirus vaccine, which could take years. The ideal life will never return to pre-corona normality is also being pushed by globalist bodies like the World Economic Forum, which has promoted the necessity of exploiting the pandemic to implement a great reset, which I think is the real agenda behind the pandemic. Giuseppe, your thoughts?
Jim, both those stories are tied to exactly that: the new world order, the great reset, the new normal. First, you have Harris. Oh, no, I wouldn't do that. I'm just a poor black child who grew up actually in upper middle class and was able to go to law school on someone else's dime, and has been, thanks to her exceptional sexual prowess, climbed the ladder by becoming 60-year-old downtown Willie Brown's sex toy when she was 29, and has figured out how to play that hardball sexual politics to get on the national stage. She's an effing liar, and she's absolutely going to serve Soros, Jorgi Schwartz, the communist who's sworn publicly on German national TV and other national platforms and international platforms to destroy the United States. So that's her contribution to the new world order. And then you get this little weirdly rabid rodent, Dr. Cruella Krapteka, who's just a classic little mentally ill PhD nerd who thinks that because she can play with digital models, algorithmic models on a computer, that she understands how virus theory works and how health works. She has no clue how this works, as evidenced by the entire joke that is this scam-demic, this fear-demic. And once again, all the people quoted in that second article, the mentally deranged Cruella Krapteka, the unnamed army official, and the psychopath with the messianic complex, the absolute shit-stained Bill Gates, who is just been propped up his entire life, believes his own press that he's this golden child, and he's nothing but a deranged psychopath. And these people need to be removed from society intensely. It's ridiculous. We should already be back to normal. Sweden's back to normal. Other countries, even China, as Scorpio pointed out yesterday, is back to normal and having a decent life. This is absolute totalitarianism. Got to stop.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. I think that's all excellent points. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, Tucker's show really is unique on the mainstream media. There's nothing else even close to it on television. And the fact that it's so popular, it just proves that people are hungry for the truth. It's part of the human condition, and there's nothing the elite can do about it. That's just how the game is set up. That's human nature. And I did notice that Tucker's show was not posted on YouTube this morning. I try to watch it at least a couple times a week. I don't have a TV, so I catch it on YouTube the next morning, and it wasn't there for whatever reason. And
Interesting.
I was thinking about Joe Biden. Do you guys remember that mafia boss back in the 1980s? He pretended to be senile and crazy. He used to walk around in his bathrobe and with without combing his hair and just looking like a nut. And that's how he was trying to escape charges, because he was just senile. Joe Biden might be doing that act in the near future more than he is now. And Kamala is just awful. She's not the least bit likable. I saw a part of her speech from one of her campaign stops the other day. Just dreadful, amateur hour, actually, really, really bad. And really, like Jim said, if they're not even, the Democrats aren't even behaving like a democracy. Either Bernie or Pocahontas should have been Joe's running mate. That would be the usual way it's handled. Is the second place guy gets to become vice president. That's usually how it's been handled. So and about the masking thing, Tony the Rat Fauci admitted several times that masks might be necessary into 2021 or even 2022. And Bill the Lizard Man Gates said the same thing. So they've got plans. They know this masking thing will destroy society as we know it, and it'll destroy human interaction as we know it. That's why they're doing it.
And the masks are really just a way of killing us slowly. It's equivalent to the boiling frog for human beings.
Yeah.
The longer you wear a mask, the more damage you're doing to yourself. And we've had the prediction that there's going to be a dramatic escalation in dementia within 2 years. It's even more serious than I feared in projecting a 5-point average loss in IQ across the nation as we come out of it. We could actually, as Deagle's projecting, lose up to 2/3 of the U.S. population. 200 million people could die between now and then, making the 200,000 who died so far look like a pittance. Meanwhile, Judicial Watch Fauci emails show who entity pushing for a press release, especially supporting China's response to the coronavirus. Judicial Watch is doing such good work in getting to the heart of the matter. The World Health Organization, World Bank convened the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board on January 27th, 2020. The following day, the Secretariat wrote an email with a subject line, time-sensitive message for the co-chairs, review of the draft statement on novel coronavirus, urgent action to further strengthen global preparedness in response to the outbreak. On January 29th, Fauci responded, look fine. Please see my comments in the attached document, which of course we're moving to be more strongly supportive of China in an effort to organize a joint statement among international organizers on January 28th on sharing research data and findings relevant to the novel coronavirus. The board member, Jeremy Farah, emailed upward of 36, mostly redacted recipients, including the directors of the National Institute of Health, sending them all a proposed joint statement, which is completely redacted here. Meanwhile, 70% of illegal aliens in federal jails have been convicted of non-immigration crimes. In other words, here's another indictment of a policy supported by the Democrats, basically open borders, where the U.S. government spent at least $162 million last year to incarcerate tens of thousands of criminal illegal immigrants for committing crimes that include rape, murder, kidnapping, and terrorism. I mean, it's just outrageous. Under the Obama administration, pertinent information relating to illegal immigration, those committing other crimes was ignored. But Trump issued an executive order in 2017 forcing the provision immigration and customs enforcement with data on a quarterly basis regarding inmates and detainees identified as foreign-born during their criminal processing. I like a judicial watch. It's been very informative, and the truth is what the Democrats can't handle because it's all adverse to their political agenda. Giuseppe, your thoughts?
The World Health Organization is part of the globalist plan to destroy the sovereign nations of North America, Canada, United States, and Western Europe. And so they have no actual dedication to real health for the population. Their agenda is to get the world population under the regular vaccination schedule and drug schedule, big pharma drug schedule. That's the goal for this giant market. That's what they want. They want people sick enough to function, but always in need of a shot or a pill. That's what the World Health Organization is all about, serving the globalist agenda. And Judicial Watch does do a great job. And both the previous mentioned World Health Organization scam and the open borders scam both come from the same George Soros color revolution, wants to destroy sovereign countries, wants to bring Bolshevik 2.0 to the United States and Western Europe by flooding all these countries with illegal aliens, disease-ridden, violent criminals, low impulse. And it's a cancer that destroys the family unit, destroys stable society, and then we have anarchy, we have communism. Oh, we'll roll you into the North American Union. It'll be all good. We'll take care of all you. That's the plan. We're watching it unfold.
I think you're right, Giuseppe, and they've weaponized immigration, flooding Europe with all of these immigrants from various African nations,
right?
Most of whom are young, actually not families, but young men who could very well turn out to be a terrorist force turning on the states that are receiving them. It's a disastrous plan. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting that this information coming forth from Judicial Watch about China. China is the model for the future. The globalists have decided that's the most efficient system to control the masses, and you'll hear nothing but praise for the communist Chinese, especially the way they handled COVID. You just grab people and throw them in a pit somewhere, lock them in their apartment or whatever you need to do. It's a totalitarian state where you have no rights and no ability to speak your mind. And one of my good friends married a Chinese girl, from China, and she told him that in every city, big and small, there are government agents that listen, and anyone that causes trouble or talks bad about the government, if they cause enough trouble, they simply disappear and you never hear from them again. And that's a story from someone that grew up in China. That's not some made up internet crap. And, the WHO, the FBI, and the UN, a lot of these institutions need to be dismantled and put into the dustbin of history. They're corrupt and they're not functioning to serve anybody but themselves. And you're completely right, Jim, about open borders. It's weaponized and it's a backdoor route to globalization and to destroy the culture. It's happening in America and Europe, and it's not benefiting anybody. And it's really all about replacement level immigration. That is the goal. And the Democrats have lost their way. You cannot support illegal immigration and the American worker at the same time. It simply is not possible.
I think that's a great point, in that they are totally authoritarian and totalitarian and won't brook any diversity in point of view. I mean, it's ironic. They claim to be the party of diversity, but that's all in terms of age, color, sex, whatnot, sexual preference. They won't tolerate any ideological diversity, any intellectual diversity, any freedom of thought or critical thinking, which is why political correctness has been the key to their progress. Meanwhile, Jews for Trump car parade in New York City targeted by counter protesters with fights erupting. I thought this was pretty damn interesting. Biggest Jews for Trump rally in the nation underway in New York City. More than 1,000 vehicles participating. Went across a Brooklyn bridge. Just spectacular. A massive gathering. Jews for Trump in Marine Park, Brooklyn, after a full day of numerous vehicle convoys driving around New York City. Chance of 4 more years at Jews for Trump rally right now in New York City. A beautiful scene. But just as an illustration of the point we were just making, it wasn't welcome by the tolerant liberals in New York City. 7 people were arrested during skirmishes between opposing sides in Manhattan. Rudolph Giuliani, the president's personal lawyer and former mayor, encountered protesters targeting a caravan of cars organized by a group identifying itself as Jews for Trump. In one video, Rudy can be seen in the passenger side with a window rolled down as anti-Trump protesters scream at him. In an interview, he said he'd encountered the caravan and protesters while driving down Fifth Avenue after taping his radio show. I would love to have had a campaign commercial of it and put it in the middle of America and say, who would you prefer for the next 4 years? This group of foul-mouthed people who don't seem to have a vocabulary beyond 3 words, or these very nice Jewish people who are driving in the car not saying anything back and not doing anything other than exercising their right to say they are for Donald Trump. I thought that was a really interesting development in New York City. Giuseppe, your thoughts?
That is really interesting, and it just shows that in every minority category there is differentiation. You can never address all XYZ is for ABC, you know, like all Jews are not for the Democrats, which is cool to see. And in my mind, to tie those two stories together is the 21st century brown shirts, the thugs that are trying to deliver this Bolshevik 2.0, which I know isn't exactly historically correct. The brown shirts were for the National Socialists, whereas this Bolshevik 2.0 is clearly for international communists. But the thuggery is the same, and the 21st century brown shirts are weaponized minorities. You've got the violent LGBTQ WTF. They mutilate their bodies, and you've got the young, mentally unstable, easily swayed suburban teens who pierce every part of their body and put plastic surgery implants for like devil horns and bizarre stuff like that. And you've got the weaponized blacks who are a small part of the total percentage of black population, but they're violent. They're the burn, loot, and murder types. All these together, egged on by paid provocateurs funded by George Soros, make up the 21st century Bolshevik 2.0 brown shirts that are fueling the Democratic Party. It's just insane.
You're 100% correct, Giuseppe. Very well said. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting, Giuseppe brought up the brown shirts. The primary leader of the brown shirts was a homosexual, and he was purged by Hitler later. So history repeats itself in some ways. And as far as New York City goes, I would think anybody that lives in New York City is absolutely shocked by what's happened to their city.
Right.
Watch some of the videos of New York City. It's amazing. The place has been decimated and businesses are closing. If you watch some of these videos where people just walk around town, so many buildings are boarded up with plywood over the windows and just closed for rent. And in prime areas too, areas where before they wouldn't even have to put up a for rent sign if something came open because there was a whole line of people waiting to take it over. So
Scorpio, you're 100% correct. This is the most valuable real estate in the world in the past.
yeah,
And de Blasio has just destroyed New York City. I mean, it's just stunning. And the wealthiest members are leaving the city, and their tax revenues are dropping precipitously because it was that highest small percent that were paying 60% of the revenue. New York City is a wasteland, and it's all consequence of incapacity of Democrats to govern properly. Meanwhile, Trump likely to report FBI's Wray and CIA Director Hesper if he's reelected. I think that's highly probable. Christopher Wray, trying to avoid the political landmines at the FBI that befell his predecessor, James Comey, Wray may have stepped in one following the revelation that the FBI has had possession of Hunter's laptop since December of 2019 and said nothing during Trump's impeachment that month by House Democrats. The Bureau already conducted a forensic analysis before issuing the December 9, 2019 subpoena for John Paul McIsaac, owner of the Mac shop in Wilmington, Delaware, where Hunter had abandoned his computers. He found in the files evidence that appeared incriminating to the Biden family and exculpatory for Trump. So he turned it over to the FBI. Unfortunately, also it went to Rudy Giuliani. Democrats claim the president had abused his power, asking Ukraine to investigate corruption of Burisma, but much of the case hinged on whether it was justified or simply political. The FBI sought the laptop as evidence with money laundering case. Their suppression of politically relevant information at such a crucial time was but one of the many ways Wray has roiled the chief executive and his allies. He's really pretty pathetic in my judgment. He also testified before Congress that Antifa, the group largely responsible for escalating and perpetuating violence in major cities for months after the George Floyd race riots, was not an organization but an ideology. When, as Candace Owens has pointed out, it's both. You can believe Black Lives Matter without believing in the organization calling itself Black Lives Matter. What could be more obvious? Gina Haspel has slow-walked, if not outright refused to turn over crucial files in the Durham investigation and other criminal probes related to the Russia collusion hoax. The now discredited accusations based on Russian disinformation supplied by the Hillary Clinton campaign, the DNC, where Christopher Steele acknowledged even to a court in London that he had composed the dossier as a paid employee of the DNC and Hillary Clinton campaign, used it to gain approval from the FISA court for surveillance, coming courtesy of the London-based Trump policy advisor George Papadopoulos, long maintained intel operatives planted information about Hillary's email to set him up as a patsy. Haspel was handpicked by her predecessor, John Brennan, to run the agency's London bureau. Coincidentally, several of the so-called predicating events that the FBI used to open Crossfire Hurricane against the Trump campaign were in her bailiwick. And here, of course, we see the actual figure who is the key behind all this nonsense, accusing Trump of collusion with Russia, Hillary Clinton. Haspel appeared to push back at the suggestions he's covering for herself and her cronies by refusing to comply with DNI Director Ratcliffe's request that he's classified. She's even hinted she may resign before Trump has the opportunity to fire her. That would be welcome. Meanwhile, Esper took over following the acrimonious exit of Jim Mad Dog Mattis as Secretary of Defense, has followed his predecessor's path in publicly undermining Trump's agenda. Just as he was declaring he'd veto efforts to rename military bases honoring Confederate generals, Esther implemented a policy banning the display of Confederate flag at bases. He also promoted Lieutenant Colonel Vinderman, the so-called whistleblower, about the phone call with Ukraine, which was outrageous, and second-guessed Trump's statement several times about the military's role in dealing with domestic insurrections that have been largely driven by left-wing rioters. I think these are very significant developments. I have no doubt that'll happen. My concern is, given it's so obvious Trump's going to do that, are they going to use their powers now to further sabotage or even take him out? Giuseppe, your thoughts?
Jim, the Wray Haspel and Esper are endemic of the great tragedy of Trump not being prepared to win the presidency, that he did not have a short list of effective, loyal operatives. I mean, Ray is classic Peter principle, nothing, who knows how to play the administrative bureaucratic game. And talk about a globalist traitor. I mean, he testified a month or so ago that the greatest terrorist threat to national security is white supremacists. That's, a euphemistic for white people who don't go along with George Soros. He publicly said that. Gina Haspel is a psychopathic lunatic who is lucky she found the deep state. Otherwise, she would have been a serial mass murderer. You look in her eyes, and there's nothing but evil there. She is scary, scary lady. And then Esper is just a traitor. I mean, he was put in place to support Trump's efforts, and he sabotages them all the time. And a true traitor is Brennan, who cultivated Haspel. So you're talking about the ugly, ugly part of the deep state, and all those people need to go away yesterday.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I've heard very bad things about Haspel. Brennan, we already knew, was a monster. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, it's funny how they're trying to say that Rudy Giuliani is a Russian asset now. I mean, let's try to stick to reality a little bit here. There's plenty of room to criticize him. He was mayor of New York City during 9/11. He had to have known something was up as mayor, but for whatever reason, he went along with it. But calling him a Russian asset is just pure fantasy. And, there's lots of traitors everywhere within our federal government. And part of the reason that they have no fear is that, under the UN documents, American government officials cannot be charged with treason, according to those documents. And that's part of the reason there's no fear on the part of these people. And, you brought up Lieutenant or Vindman, he was whining about not being treated well by Trump. Well, what did he expect? I mean, he went up there and testified and basically lied and just made stories up. It's just human nature that, if you don't take the king out, he's not going to be all that nice to you after you fail to take him down. Right. History is, full of these kind of stories. So it's no surprise. And I'm tired of his whining. I think he already stepped down. So good for, I'm glad. I don't want to hear about him anymore.
During his testimony before Congress, he acknowledged there was nothing illegal about the phone call, that his differences were rooted in policy instead.
Unreal.
Which, of course, made it not an impeachable offense to begin with. Meanwhile, we want to hear from you. Pro or con, send us fan mail to liveneedtoknow@gmail.com. liveneedtoknow@gmail.com. Meanwhile, Robert David Steele, former CIA, who would have been an expert witness for me had I received the trial to which I was entitled, has made an appeal to Ivanka to suggest that there be a debate arranged with the Constitution Green and Libertarian Party candidates on October 29th, with Dr. Cynthia McKinney as the moderator, ideally in Georgia. This is to give the lesser parties the opportunity to speak out. Here's a comment on one of those from my blog, Joseph for Truth. On the surface, an excellent idea, as so many that Robert David Steele comes up with. I actually wish he were a serious advisor, in a serious advisor position with Trump. I'm sure Trump would benefit. However, at this late stage in the game, Trump is probably going to figure there'd be too much risk involved. What if the third-party candidates didn't play nice and made him look like a fool or a villain? They could do that in ways that even a recondite fellow traveling major party guy like Biden wouldn't, by hitting below the belt on some of Podstrupo baggage, like his long-ago minor Epstein connection. Or what if they expressed a preference for Biden's anti-fracking policies? The Greens certainly might. Such a risk is not something Trump or his advisors would probably court at this time when things are looking good. But keep trying, DRS. Here's another from William DeBerg. Trump is doing a delicate balancing act. He mostly sends out his conspiracy views in code, mentioning, for example, the JFK assassination in the context of Ted Cruz and his father, pedophilia, for example, the Joe Paterno frame-up, 9/11, criticizing the Bushes, his questioning of the bin Laden raid and SEAL Team 6, etc. There's no reason for him to go so far as to alienate key voters. What we'll know his true intentions if he fires the heads of the CIA, FBI, and DOJ after the election. I thought those were very thoughtful observations. Your final thoughts, Giuseppe?
Well, Jim, 1 week from today, either we have a preferable outcome or we witness the slow creaking of the opening of the gates of hell. And it's crazy. I don't know what to make of it. I know you're very confident in a Trump landslide, but there's so many efforts being made by the globalists to steal this election and place Biden in power. I'm concerned that somehow they're going to pull it off. And Robert David Steele is a fascinating guy. Sometimes I think he's one of the most lucid, insightful people on earth. And then sometimes I think, what color is the sky in Robert Steele's world? Because I think some of the crazy stuff he says is to keep himself alive when he says the real important stuff. So
I believe you're completely right, Giuseppe. Scorpio, your final thoughts.
Well, I share Giuseppe's concerns about the outcome of this election. I don't think these globalists, the cabal, deep state, whatever you want to call them, they're not going to just roll over and let Trump be elected without some kind of major problem. So we'll just have to wait and see. I know the whole world is actually very concerned about this, and we'll just have to see how it plays out. I doubt that the results are going to be established rapidly. I think they're going to use a strategy of, well, let's just keep counting votes until we win. That's what they've done in the past with several recent House of Representative elections. So, and the idea about having a debate with the smaller parties, that's a great idea. It won't be allowed to happen. But this two-party duopoly needs to be put to an end, because we need something to come in there and shake it up a little bit. The same people are kind of running both sides of the game here. That's why the Republicans were so lukewarm to unfriendly towards Trump from the very beginning. And I thought the email made a great point about Trump talking in code about his knowledge of conspiracy. That he knows a lot of this stuff, and he does drop little hints, and he's a master at doing that. And he's also a master at trolling the liberals. No one has been able to come close to him.
I want to thank Giuseppe Vaffangulo from the District of Criminals and David Scorpio from the exotic land of Ecuador for their excellent commentary day after day after day. I believe in this election we're going to have a repeat of what happened with C-SPAN after the Republican convention. They had a Democrat and a Republican line, but everyone calling on the Democrat line was declaring they were going to vote for Trump. They had to change it to a Trump-Biden line to get any Biden supporters on. We're seeing long lines all over the country for this vote. I guarantee you they are not staying hours in order to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. This is going to be a landslide of proportions this country has never before seen. Mark my words. Testable proposition. We'll find out if I'm right or wrong, but that's my assessment. Meanwhile, we'll be back tomorrow with the news you need to know. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you then.